The Light That Stayed is a story where mystery and love intertwine. When Clara moves into a house with a past that refuses to rest, she uncovers letters that bridge the living and the lost. Blending the eerie pull of a ghost story with the warmth of unexpected connection, it's a haunting, romantic tale about the light that lingers and the hearts that choose to follow it. The Light That Stayed, a story by 10 Chapters Studio. Chapter 1, The House That Kept Secrets. The first time Clara saw the house on Ashwood Lane, it looked almost shy. Its gray paint peeled in soft curls, the porch leaned like someone listening, and the air smelled faintly of rain and old apples. She hadn't planned to buy it. It happened the way impulse often does, with grief, wine, and the illusion of decisiveness. The listing called it a Victorian with history. It hadn't lied. When the real estate agent handed her the keys, she'd said cheerfully, "Locals call it the Whitaker place." Then, after a pause, "A bit of a story there. The man who built it disappeared one Halloween years ago. His wife was from Mexico. Lovely woman, by all accounts. They say he started hearing her voice after she passed." Clara had smiled politely, pretending it was the kind of story one could ignore. Now, standing in the entryway, she wished she'd asked more. The walls felt watchful, though not unkind. A grandfather clock stood in the front room, handsome but frozen at 11:47. When she passed it, the glass threw back a faint ghost of her face. 2 shapes instead of 1, as if someone else had paused beside her. When she blinked, it was gone. A draft stirred the curtains even with the windows shut. "Hello," she said softly. "It's just us now." Her voice felt too small for the space, so she filled it with noise. Unpacking, sweeping, the clang of a pan. When the kitchen light flickered out for good, she found her flashlight and stepped onto the porch. The night air was cool, smelling of damp leaves and earth. A voice carried over the fence. "Everything all right over there?" She turned. A man stood in the yard next door. One hand braced on the top rail, the other holding a mug that sent up thin curls of steam. "Just a fuse, I think. I might have scared it with enthusiasm." He smiled. "Those old panels like to spark. You're lucky if the lights only flicker." "Lucky isn't quite the word I'd use." She laughed softly. "First night? First and possibly last," she murmured. He chuckled. "It'll grow on you. I can come by in the morning and take a look, if you want. I've got a decent multimeter and an even better guess. Are you an electrician?" "More of a carpenter," he said. "But I've fought my share of bad wiring." She studied the easy confidence in his posture, then nodded. "That'd be great. Thank you. Name's Mason Reed. I'm next door. Clara Walsh. First day." "Well, welcome to the street, Clara." He took a sip. "Don't worry too much about the creaks. You'll learn which ones are harmless." "I'll try." He nodded toward the dark windows. "You've picked the draftiest house in Maple Hollow, but also the one with the best view. You'll see it in the morning." "That sounds like hope." "Experience," he grinned, then paused. "Good night, neighbor. Try not to electrocute yourself before I get here." "I'll do my best." He lingered a heartbeat longer, the quiet between them warm but uncertain. The porch light caught the side of his face, softening the edge of his smile, and she felt an unexpected awareness, the way air changes just before a storm. When he turned back toward his yard, she stood still for a moment, pulse catching in that hush after footsteps fade. Inside, the air settled again. The clock gleamed faintly through the doorway, its still hands holding their vigil at 11:47. Clara listened to the house breathe. Wood shifting, wind brushing the siding. It didn't feel empty, more like a place that had been waiting to be noticed. She ran her hand lightly along the mantel, tracing dust. "You'll do," she murmured. "We'll figure it out." Upstairs, she found clean sheets, opened a window to the cool night, and lay beneath the quiet creak of rafters. The house answered softly, as if settling around her. In the morning, she found a flyer tucked under the porch mat. Maple Hollow Lantern Walk, October 31st. Bring a name you miss. She smiled. Morning turned into a parade of light, and pinged it to the fridge. At the bottom, a small note mentioned the town's Remembrance Altar, November 1 to 2, organized with help from the local Hispanic cultural group. Clara read the words twice, thinking of her mother, then set the paper aside. She made tea, rolled up her sleeves, and decided to start fixing what she could. If the house really kept secrets, she thought, maybe it was waiting for someone to listen. End of Chapter 1. Chapter 2. Clara woke to pale light spilling across the ceiling and the faint groan of floorboards shifting in the cool. The power was still out, no hum of the fridge, no tick from the clock downstairs, only the muffled rustle of leaves outside. She pulled on a sweater and went to the porch. The air smelled of dew and wood smoke from somewhere down the street. A single maple leaf, red gold and perfect, had settled on the top step. Footsteps crunched on the gravel path. When she looked up, Mason was coming through the gate, toolbox in one hand and a paper cup in the other. "Brought you something," he said, offering the cup. "Black, no sugar, educated guess." She smiled, the steam warming her face. "You're a hero." "Just a neighbor with caffeine and tools." He set the box down beside the steps. "Figured I'd fix that fuse before you start lighting candles in protest." "The candles were next on the list," she admitted. Inside, the air still held that faint sweetness of apples and dust. As Mason crouched beside the fuse box, she caught another scent. Cedar, fresh and unmistakable. It drifted past like a breath, gone before she could decide whether it was real. These old houses, you tighten one wire and 5 others sigh in relief. "You sound like you speak from experience." "I do. I rent mine, so I can blame the landlord when it sparks." She laughed. "Lucky." "Give it a minute," he said, flicking a switch. The kitchen light stuttered once, then steadied. "There, you're back in the 21st century." "Thank you," she said, seriously. He brushed his hands on his jeans. "Any other disasters while I'm here?" "Only this wall," she said, pointing to a patch of uneven plaster near the front room. "When I tapped it yesterday, it sounded hollow." "Hollow?" He rapped his knuckles against it. The sound came back deep and empty. Might be an old service cavity. Or something hidden. He raised an eyebrow. Hidden treasure or hidden trouble? "Let's find out." Together they pried at the panel until it loosened with a sigh, releasing a puff of cedar-scented dust. Inside lay a small tin box, rusted but intact. "Guess I win strangest repair job of the week," Mason said softly. Clara carried it to the kitchen table. The latch resisted, then clicked. Open. Inside lay a folded letter tied with a blue ribbon and a small slip of paper tucked beneath it. The handwriting was neat, slanted, slightly unsteady. 5 nights. Not all at once. Begin when the maples turn. Listen to the house.
Keep the last for the night when the veil is thin." They exchanged a glance. "When the veil is thin," Mason murmured. "That's Halloween." "And the Day of the Dead right after," she said quietly. "His wife was from Mexico." He nodded. Then these were for her. She untied the ribbon carefully and unfolded the letter. October 12th, 1948. My dearest Isabel, they've started calling this the house that listens. Perhaps that's why I write to its walls, in case you can hear me through them. If souls return anywhere, surely they come home first. You once told me the dead visit when the marigolds bloom. If that's true, I'll keep a light in the window for you. 5 nights of waiting. If you find me, follow the scent of apples and cedar. That's where I'll be. Clara's breath caught. "It's beautiful," she whispered, "and unbearably sad." Mason leaned on the back of a chair. "See the marks inside the box? 4 empty ovals. There were more letters." 5 nights, she said. He hid them. They sat in quiet thought. Outside, wind stirred the trees. Somewhere, a dog barked once and fell silent. Finally, Mason straightened. "I'll help you patch the wall later, no charge. But if you find another letter, call me. I'm too curious now." "Deal," she said, smiling. "1 letter a night, then. If the house wants to talk, we'll listen." "Fair enough," he said. "Besides, some stories need breathing room." For a moment, he didn't move. The quiet between them stretched, warm and unhurried. His sleeve brushed hers as he reached for his toolbox, and something in the air changed, small, deliberate, like a current passing through both of them. When he left, the house seemed to hold its silence differently, less empty, more aware. Clara set the tin on the table, the slip of paper beside it. 5 nights, not all at once. She looked toward the grandfather clock in the front room, still stopped at 11:47, and whispered, "All right, Mr. Whitaker. I'm listening." That evening, when the wind rose again, she lit a single candle in the window and read the letter aloud. The flame flickered once, then steadied, as though the house were answering back. End of Chapter 2. Chapter 3. The Maple Leaf Letter. By the next afternoon, the house felt different, less like a stranger, more like something halfway to forgiving her for moving in. The kitchen light held steady, and she even managed toast without setting off the alarm. Mason arrived as promised, toolbox in one hand, 2 mugs in the other. "Peace offering," he said, handing her one. "If we're working with plaster dust, we deserve coffee first." "You're spoiling me." "Strategic move. Makes future favors easier to ask." They set up by the wall she'd opened the day before. The scent of old cedar lingered faintly, as if the hidden space had exhaled and hadn't stopped. Mason measured the opening. "We'll brace the frame before closing it up. Hand me that level." She passed it, watching how easily he worked. Steady, patient. There was something grounding about him, the way he filled silence without crowding it. "You make this look easy." Years of practice, and a healthy respect for gravity. They worked in rhythm, the scrape of tools blending with the hush of wind through the maples. Then Mason tapped the wall. "Hear that?" The sound came back hollow again, but from a different spot. He tilted his head, listening. "Another cavity, just above the baseboard." "You think—" He nodded, sliding his screwdriver beneath the wood. The board lifted with a reluctant sigh, releasing a drift of dust and a faint scent of dry leaves. Behind it lay an envelope folded carefully in wax paper. Clara caught it before it could slip. Her heart thudded. "There's another one." They sat at the table, brushing dust from the paper. Inside was a single sheet, the same careful hand, but no date. Between its folds lay a pressed maple leaf, color faded, but whole. She lifted it gently. He must have sealed this one later. Maybe it didn't need a date. Maybe it's a memory. She unfolded the page. "You said once that autumn feels like a farewell that doesn't hurt. I used to think you meant the trees, how they let go without fear, but I think you meant the knowing, that some things end softly if they've been loved enough. Today I swept the porch. The marigolds are almost gone, but the maples still hold color. I thought of you and how you said the dead don't need pity, only company. I hope this house gives you that wherever you are."
Clara's throat tightened. She looked at the leaf again, its veins like tiny rivers frozen in time. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "More tender than the first," Mason said. "Less afraid." "Do you think she ever came back?" He exhaled. "Maybe, or maybe he wrote until he could believe she had." They sat quietly. The wind brushed against the windows. Light shifted, amber and soft. "You said you have a son. Does he like old houses?" "He likes making forts out of boxes. Houses are just bigger forts." "He lives with you full-time?" "Half and half. He's with his mom this week. It's messy, but we make it work." She nodded. "That's good. For him. For both of us," he said. "He's the best thing I ever built." She smiled at that. "I like how you talk about things, like everything can be fixed if you use the right tools." "Most things can," he said. "It's just knowing where to start." Their knees brushed under the table, an accident neither corrected. Heat rose between them, subtle but alive, like static before lightning. When they replaced the panel, she hesitated. "Do you think it's strange that this house feels awake?" "Not strange, just old enough to remember what people forget." By the time they finished, the light had thinned to gold. They shared a quiet supper, soup she'd managed to reheat and bread she hadn't baked, and talked about small things: the fall fair, the best coffee in town, Ethan's science project. When he left, he paused at the porch rail. "Tomorrow?" "If the house allows it," she teased. He smiled, eyes lingering a second longer than necessary. "Then I'll take my chances." After he was gone, Clara sat on the porch, the letter beside her and the pressed maple leaf tucked carefully between her fingers. She held it to the last bit of light until it glowed faintly red. The air was still, except for the faint, rhythmic ticking of something inside the house, like a heartbeat long paused and now remembering itself. End of Chapter 3.
Chapter 4. The Stopped Clock. By the weekend, the house had started to sound like company instead of emptiness. Music played softly from Clara's phone, sunlight stretched across the floorboards, and paint cans stood open like bright promises. Mason leaned against the doorway of the upstairs hall, a roller in one hand, the other clutching a rag that had once been white. "I think this color might forgive the wallpaper," he said. "I'll believe it when I see it." "You don't trust my artistic vision?" "Your artistic vision involves covering everything in beige."
neutral tones. Beige is what happens when paint loses ambition." Clara laughed, the sound echoing off the high ceilings. "You're full of very professional wisdom." "Years of failure," he said lightly, dipping the roller again. They worked for an hour, companionable in rhythm, two people who didn't need to fill every silence. Outside, wind carried the faint smell of wood smoke and drying leaves. When Clara moved a small dresser to reach the wall behind it, something clattered, a hollow, uneven sound that didn't belong to furniture or nails. Mason turned instantly. "You hear that?" She knelt, pressing her ear to the wall. Same kind of echo as before. They exchanged a look. He fetched his screwdriver, easing the narrow panel loose with slow, deliberate care. Dust drifted down like ash. Inside was another envelope, sealed but brittle at the edges. Clara brushed it off gently. The handwriting was the same neat, slanted hand. October 18th, 1948. Her pulse quickened. The same week as the first letter. Mason nodded. "Let's take it downstairs." They sat at the kitchen table again. The faint scent of cedar hung in the air, blending with something warmer, coffee, paint, and his cologne. Clara broke the seal carefully and unfolded the page. October 18th, 1948. My dearest Isabel. The clock in the front room stopped today, at 1:45. I tried to wind it, but the hands refused to move, as if they'd chosen their own hour. Perhaps that's when the distance between us closed for a moment. If I believed in signs, I'd think you'd touched it from wherever you are. I will keep the time as it is. Let it wait with me. The air here smells of cedar and apples, your scent, even now. The marigolds are almost gone. I wonder if you'll follow their path back to me when the veil thins. If you do, I'll be waiting in the same place, by the light in the window, at 11:47. The words sank between them, quiet and heavy. Clara exhaled slowly. That's the exact time on the clock downstairs. Mason looked toward the living room. You think it stopped that same night? She nodded, and stayed that way ever since. He leaned back, thoughtful. Maybe no one ever dared wind it again. She said, maybe they didn't need to. They sat without speaking for a while. Outside, the wind pressed softly against the windows, as if the house itself were listening. Finally, Mason said, "You ever notice how grief and superstition overlap? People need to believe the ones they love are still listening." She smiled faintly. "And you don't?" He rolled the edge of the envelope between his fingers. "Sometimes I do. My son leaves notes for me when he's with his mom. I save every one. When he's gone, they feel alive somehow, like they're keeping him here. That's not superstition, that's love." He met her eyes, a quiet ache behind his smile. "You sound like you've done your share of waiting." "I have," she admitted, "but not anymore." "Good," he said simply. The silence that followed was softer than before. The way he looked at her, steady, unguarded, made her chest tighten. Clara reread the letter to distract herself, her eyes catching on the line about the light in the window. She imagined Thomas Whitaker standing there, wading through the same kind of quiet she felt now. When Mason rose to leave, she walked him to the door. The house had dimmed into twilight, the kind that paints everything gold for a single moment before letting go. "Same time tomorrow?" he asked. "If the house allows it." He smiled. "You're starting to sound like a local." He hesitated, his hand grazing hers as she reached for the doorknob. The touch lingered, a small electric pause neither acknowledged. Then he stepped out into the fading light. After he left, Clara stood by the window, the letter still in her hands. The grandfather clock waited in the corner, its still hands marking 11:47. She touched its cold glass face lightly, half expecting to feel a pulse beneath. Instead, she only felt her own heartbeat, steady, certain, echoing faintly through the quiet house. End of Chapter 4. Chapter 5. The Space Between. By late afternoon, the house smelled faintly of sawdust and rain. Mason arrived right on time, toolbox in hand, jacket damp at the shoulders. "You weren't kidding about the draft," he said, stepping inside. "Feels like the house is trying to keep all the ghosts to itself." Clara smiled. "You sound disappointed? Maybe just curious?" He nodded toward the coffee pot. "Did the power survive the night?" "Barely. It flickered once around midnight, but I think that was just the wind pretending to be dramatic." He smiled. "You two are getting along, then?" They moved upstairs, where paint cans still stood open. The air held a faint, metallic tang of damp plaster. Clara handed him a rag. "If you're going to pry anything open today, at least pretend it's intentional." "Got it. Precision work only." He traced his fingers along the baseboard near the radiator. "See this line? It's been resealed. Someone hid something here, probably before the last paint job." Clara crouched beside him. "So it's not finished talking?" "Looks that way." He wedged his screwdriver under the board, easing it loose. Dust spiraled through the light. Behind it lay a thin envelope, darkened at the corners. October 24th, 1948. 5 days after the last one, she murmured. They carried it downstairs, setting it beside the others. Mason leaned on the table while Clara opened the flap. "My dearest Isabel, I dreamed of you again last night. You stood at the edge of the river calling my name as if it still belonged to you. The marigolds have nearly faded, and I've begun to wonder if you will follow their path when the veil thins. I'll leave the porch light burning, as I always do. If you find your way home, follow the glow across the water." Clara's voice softened as she finished. "It's more desperate than the others." "Like he's afraid she won't come," he said quietly. The air felt close, heavy with old words and new understanding. Clara rose and poured 2 glasses of red wine. "I think we've earned it." He took one, his smile easy. "I'm not arguing." They sat across from each other, candlelight softening the room. The silence between them felt charged, every small movement louder than it should be. "You ever think about leaving? Starting somewhere new?" "I already did. I just haven't decided if it helped." "Why here?" She turned the glass in her hands. "It was quiet and cheap. I thought if I fixed something broken, maybe I'd feel less like one myself." He studied her. "You don't seem broken to me." She gave a small, tired smile. "You don't know me well enough yet." "Maybe not, but I'd like to." The words landed softly, like a thread pulling tighter. Her pulse quickened. The clock in the next room ticked once, then stopped again, as if the house were listening. "You're not what I expected from this neighborhood," she said at last. "Good or bad?" "I'm not sure yet." They both laughed, quietly, but with an edge that didn't quite belong to friendship anymore. When the laughter faded, Mason glanced toward the window. "The weather's turning. I should check that shutter before it comes loose." "You don't have to." "I know." His voice gentled. "But I want to." Rain had begun to fall by the time he finished. He came back in, hair damp, the collar of his jacket dark with water. "All set? The ghosts will have to knock politely now." She smiled. "Maybe they already are." He stood near the doorway, close enough that she could feel the chill still clinging to him. For a heartbeat, neither moved. His gaze lingered, brief, unguarded, before he looked away. When he finally left, the porch light caught his silhouette, broad shoulders, easy stride, and Clara stayed by the window long after he was gone. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It hummed with the echo of conversation, of something waiting. On the table, the newest letter lay beside the others, the ink browned with time. The line about the light in the window echoed in her mind. She turned off the lamp, leaving only the porch light burning. Its glow stretched across the room like a quiet promise to whoever still listened and to the living who suddenly weren't so alone. End of Chapter 5. Chapter 6. The Waiting Week. Mason didn't come by much that week. His son was staying with him, and between school pickups, homework, and dinners, his days were full. He still waved from the yard sometimes or called out a hello over the fence, but mostly the week felt quieter, like the house had gone back to holding its breath. Clara told herself the quiet was good. She sanded door frames, painted trim, and worked through small repairs. But by midweek, she caught herself listening for footsteps on the gravel path. The silence that had once felt like peace now hummed with something she couldn't quite name. Sometimes she heard Mason's voice outside, low and warm, talking to his son. She'd catch laughter, a hammer tapping, or the scrape of a wheelbarrow. It wasn't intrusive, just familiar. Thursday afternoon, she stepped onto the porch to shake out a drop cloth. Mason was in his yard, kneeling beside a small pile of soil while a dark-haired boy, maybe 8 or 9, arranged wooden stakes in a crooked line. "Afternoon," Mason called, glancing up. "Hey, new project?" "Ethan's science assignment, measuring light for bean plants." Ethan looked up, smiling shyly. "Hi." "Hi, Ethan," she said. "That sounds like a great experiment." He grinned. "Dad says the plants grow better if I talk to them, but that's just so he doesn't have to." Clara laughed. "He might be right." Mason shot her a look. "Don't encourage him." Ethan went back to his plants, humming. Clara leaned on the fence. "He looks like you." "Poor kid," Mason said with a smile. Then, quieter, "He's a good one. The week goes fast when he's here." "I can tell," she said softly. "It sounds happy." He nodded. "It is. Louder, too." They stood there for a moment, the easy quiet of neighbors who suddenly didn't feel like strangers. Then Mason said, "That radiator upstairs still waiting for me? I was trying not to mention it. I'll come by Sunday, once Ethan's back with his mom, if the house behaves till then. I'll do my best to keep it polite." He smiled. "You're good at that." That night, The house felt larger again. The quiet she'd once needed now pressed against her in strange ways. She tried reading, painting, even rearranging a shelf, but none of it filled the stillness where his voice used to be. She caught herself touching the back of a chair he'd leaned on, tracing the rim of a mug he'd used, small, foolish gestures that made her heart stutter. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was expectant. When Sunday came, Mason returned just after noon. The air had that silver look of late October, trees thinning fast. He said Ethan survived Bean Week. Did the plants? Barely, he smiled. But we learned patience. They went upstairs to check the radiator. Mason loosened the bolts while she handed him tools. He said, "I thought of you the other day," casually. "Oh?" "I saw someone at the hardware store arguing about paint undertones. Sounded familiar." "I'm not that bad." "You were yesterday." "Yesterday?" He shrugged, smiling. "Feels shorter." "Yeah," she said softly. "It does." When he lifted the radiator cover, something shifted. A hollow tap, followed by a faint metallic rattle. He paused, reaching into the gap. His fingers closed around a small, dust-caked envelope. "Another one," he said quietly. Clara took it. The paper was darker, the ink faint, the wax seal still intact. Across the front, in the same hand as before, "For the night when the veil is thin." Her breath caught. "This is it, the last one." He nodded. Then it was meant to be found now. They carried it downstairs and set it beside the others. Neither spoke for a while. The house seemed to listen again, its stillness almost alive. Mason poured them both coffee. "Halloween's next week," he said. "Maybe that's when he meant it to be opened." Claire traced her fingers over the wax seal. If the others were for her spirit, this one must have been written for when he thought she'd return. Or for himself, Mason murmured, to say goodbye. They sat in silence, the clock giving one faint tick before stopping again. "I don't want to open it yet. Not until it feels right." "Then we wait." "Until Halloween?" He smiled, voice low. "A date with history." She met his gaze. "And ghosts. Don't forget good company." Something in her chest shifted. An ache and warmth tangled together. "That too," she said softly. When he left, the envelope remained on the table, its edges trembling faintly in the draft. Outside, the sky had turned the color of pewter. The wind picked up, whispering through the maples. And for the first time, Clara could swear the house itself was waiting too. End of Chapter 6. Chapter 7, The Night Before. By the night before Halloween, Maple Hollow seemed to glow from within. Pumpkins blinked on porches, windows brightened early, and the air carried smoke and cinnamon wherever the wind wandered. Inside Clara's house, the quiet felt attentive, the way a room goes still when someone lifts a bow to a string. She tried to outpace it. She painted the banister, straightened a set of wavering picture hooks, polished the clock glass without touching the frozen hands. Each task finished cleanly, yet nothing released the coil in her chest. The sealed letter waited on the table. Tomorrow had never felt so close. The knock came just after 6. She knew it would be him. She knew it the way you know rain is near, just from the change in the light.
Mason stood on the porch with a paper bag and the damp shine of mist in his hair. "Provisions," he said, lifting the bag. "Soup that does not require heroics. Bread that forgives mistakes." "You have perfect timing," she said, stepping back, "and very kind instincts." "Selfish instincts," he answered, smiling. "I wanted to see you before the town turns into lanterns." They cooked without choreography, passing spoons and salt and glances like they had done it 100 times. Conversation loosened, wandered, doubled back to old movies and the best tools for stubborn screws. The house breathed with them, boards easing, the fire giving small, content sounds. When they sat, the sealed letter lay between the candles. Mason looked at it and then at her. "Tomorrow?" he said softly. "Tomorrow," I echoed, and felt the words settle through her like a pebble dropped in a deep pool. A draft slid across the floor. The candle flames bent, then steadied. Mason tipped his head. "You hear that upstairs?" "Only when it wants to be heard," she said. He leaned his arms on the table, close enough that she could feel a small warmth on her forearm. "Clara," he said, and her name felt like a private thing when he said it. "The letters, the clock, but if you want me here tomorrow, I am here." The coil in her chest loosened. "I want you here." His breath left on a small laugh. "Good." For a second I thought I imagined that. "You do not imagine much," she said, smiling, and watched color rise under the day's stubble along his jaw. They cleared without hurry. In the living room, the fire had settled to low coals. She knelt to add a split log, and when she stood, he was there with the poker. His hand brushed hers, a light touch, no pretenses. Heat moved up her wrist in a quick, bright line. "You missed a spot," he said, voice low. He touched her cheek with his thumb, a whisper of contact, and showed her the faint dab of ash. She leaned into the smallest pressure of his hand, not even a step, more like a thought. Their eyes met and held. The distance between them thinned to breath and possibility. Something rattled on the porch as the wind shifted. The sound broke gently, not a shock, more an exhale. They both smiled, as if they had caught themselves mid-confession. "The clock is still at 11:47. "It is waiting," she answered. "Then we wait too." They moved to the doorway and watched the street. A child in a red coat hopped from one maple leaf to the next, counting under her breath. 2 teens crossed with paper lanterns cupped in their palms. The river beyond was only a darker seam in the dusk, yet it felt close, like the part of a story you have not reached but already believe. "Thank you for dinner," he said when he took his jacket. He did not put it on yet. "And for letting me in on this." "You let yourself in," she said, and saw his mouth tilt with the pleased, unsure look she was learning to love. "At the risk of sounding reckless, if tomorrow is for listening to the dead, tonight feels like a night to tell the living what matters." She felt the answer rise, too swift to hide. "It does." He breathed it in, as if the word had a scent. "Tomorrow," he said again, softer this time, not as a promise only, but as a request. "Tomorrow," she agreed. She walked him to the porch and stayed there, watching until the dark took him, and the quiet became the kind that hums with hope. Inside, the house settled. The letter kept its seal. The clock waited with its patient hands. When she turned off the lamps, the window held one steady flame, the kind that tells travelers they have not been forgotten. She touched the cold glass lightly. The pane gave a tiny sound, almost musical, like a glass tuned by a wet finger. It faded, yet the warmth in her chest did not. She whispered to the room, "Tomorrow." And this time, the word sounded like a doorway. The house held its breath and listened. End of Chapter 7.
Chapter 8. The Veil Between. Halloween arrived on a bright wind that smelled of rain and cider. By dusk, porch lights shimmered and children hurried past with lanterns swinging. From somewhere down the street came the slow rhythm of a guitar. Clara placed the last candle on the table. The final letter lay between the flames, its wax seal glowing like skin. When the knock came, she already had her hand on the knob. Mason stepped in, hair damp, warmth rising from his coat. He looked at the letter, then at her, and his face changed in the way a room changes when a window opens. "Ready?" he asked. "As I'll ever be." They sat close, shoulders nearly touching. Mason slid his thumb beneath the seal. The wax gave with a soft crack, and he unfolded the page. October 31st, 1948. My dearest Isabel, if you have found your way back, the stories were true. I have kept a light for you, and tonight will be the last. This house is full. If I disappear, it will be because I finally followed you home. By Thomas. They said nothing for a while. Wind rolled through the chimney. The candles leaned, then steadied. "Followed you home," Clara whispered. "Not lost. Chosen." Mason nodded. "Chosen."
A faint scent drifted through the room. Apples, cedar, and marigold, as if someone had just passed by. It moved toward the stairs, gentle as breath. They rose together. The upper hall was darker than it should have been, the air cool against their faces. Beneath the narrow door glowed a thin band of light, the door that never opened easily. "It should be dark in there," Clara murmured. "Maybe it shouldn't," he said. The door eased under her hand. The small back room shimmered with a pale glow, the color of lantern light seen through rain. On the sill lay a brass key, its bow shaped like a marigold, polished to a soft shine. "That wasn't here before," Mason whispered. Clara reached, but stopped short. The air above it felt charged, like the moment before lightning. She closed her eyes and listened. The house felt full, alive. 11:47, Mason said quietly. "Do you hear it?" A single tick answered, steady and careful. She opened her eyes to his, close enough to see rain still caught in his lashes. "Stay with me," she said, barely audible. "I'm here," he replied, taking her hand. Their fingers fit naturally. The key gleamed between them like a tiny star. From the street came the distant lantern walk, voices drifting like a slow river of light. "Thomas," Clara whispered, "if you're here, you're seen." Something eased, a hush that felt like relief. The glow thinned to ordinary dusk. The air warmed, and the key's shine dimmed to brass. He lifted it and set it in her palm. His thumb brushed her wrist. A quick shiver moved through her, clean as a spark. "You're shaking," he said. "Only a little, in a good way." He smiled, careful, then not. He leaned toward the window, where lanterns floated on the black river, bright coins on water. "I don't want to disappear," he said, voice rough. "I've done enough disappearing." "Then don't." He hesitated, then bent close. Their foreheads touched first, a quiet meeting.
The kiss followed, light, certain, without hurry, the kind that feels both new and remembered. When he drew back, it was with care, as if laying down something precious. "Ethan," he said, not as an apology, but a truth. "I won't ask him to run before he's learned the path." "I know," she answered. "I wouldn't ask you to." He breathed out. "Tomorrow," he said, "I'll come back. I won't vanish this time." "I'll leave the light," she promised. From the hall came a small click. Downstairs, the clock had stopped again at its old hour. The house felt lighter, like a room after goodbyes spoken kindly. They went down hand in hand. At the table, the last letter rested beside the empty tin. Mason touched the page once, his fingers close to hers. "Chosen," he said again. He left before the rain returned. Clara stood in the doorway, the key warm in her palm. She set it on the mantel beside the tin and the blue ribbon. In the window, the candle burned steady. "Home," she whispered to the quiet, and this time, it sounded like an answer. End of Chapter 8.
Chapter 9. After the Storm. Morning came washed and clean, the sky the pale color behind rain. It was November 1st, the Day of the Dead. Clara woke with the weightless calm of something accepted. Downstairs, wax had pooled into milky shapes. The last letter lay open, edges curled. She touched the words and felt steadier than she expected. Followed you home. Chosen. Not drowning, a crossing. Mason hadn't called. She told herself the storm made that forgivable. She made tea and didn't drink it, cleaned the candle glass, straightened the ribbon on the tin. The house moved around her in small sighs, a faint thread of cedar coming and going like memory. By noon, the clouds loosened. She stepped onto the porch. The river below ran brown and fast. At the corner, sawhorses blocked the road across Miller's Creek. She stayed busy, building a small altar on the mantel, marigold petals circling the brass key. It looked content there, as if waiting for flowers. She told herself not to look toward the road. Of course she did. Dusk came early. She lit one candle in the window. The flame looked small against the gray. The clock gave a hesitant tick, then another, as if testing its own pulse. Headlights appeared at the far end of the street. A truck idled, and she was at the door before the knock. Mason stood there, hair damp, apology in his eyes. "I didn't vanish. The bridge went under. I waited at a friend's, no signal, no excuse good enough when all I wanted was to be here." Relief rose through her like warmth after cold. The scold she'd practiced turned into a laugh. "You could have trained a pigeon." "I considered swimming. I build better than I swim." "Get in," she said. The house seemed pleased. Air warmed, floors quieted. Mason set a fire with practice ease. "You left the candle," he said. "Like Thomas." He looked to the mantel, the key ringed in petals. "You kept it." It wanted to be kept and seen. He crossed back to her slowly as if testing a bridge. He said, "I thought all day about the difference between disappearing and arriving. I've done the first. I want to learn the second." "You are already." He breathed once, steadying. He could smell rain on wool and under it cedar and heat. "I missed you," he said. It had been one night. It sounded like more. It scared me, that missing. It scared me too, and the truth brightened rather than burned. He lifted a hand, traced a small question along her jaw. She closed the last bit of distance. The kiss was not surprise, but answer, light,
certain and complete. The room changed color around them. A tick sounded behind them, clear and even. They turned. The clock's second hand moved one deliberate inch. It stopped again, and that was enough. Mason smiled. We woke something. Or it woke us. They stayed close, speaking in the quiet rhythm that follows understanding. He told her about waiting out the storm at a diner with one generator, every talk circling back to home. She told her about the petals and how the house had softened like someone had opened a window inside it.
Ethan called. He's with his mom tonight. They built an altar. He asked if we'd light a candle here for the ones this house remembers. We already have, she said. He looked at her, a promise shaped like a question. She answered by lacing their fingers. The fit had not been chance. It felt like design. Stay, she said quietly. Stay a while. I'm not in a rush. I'd like to learn how this house breathes. They stood by the window, watching rain turn to mist along the river. In the glass, two figures leaned together, and for a heartbeat, another two seemed near them, gentle and familiar. She didn't move. He didn't speak. Some moments are already words. The candle in the window burned steady, untroubled. End of Chapter 9.
Chapter 10. The Light That Stayed. By evening, the town gathered itself again in color. Paper lanterns swung like small suns, marigold petals sifted down the steps, and music drifted up from the river. A low song with bright edges, a voice in Spanish that made the dusk luminous. Clara and Mason stood on the porch with mugs they didn't need for warmth. The air was mild, a brief kindness before winter. Inside, the old clock gave an honest tick now and then, not steady yet, but learning. Ethan said he lit one for his grandmother. He asked if we could add names here, too. We can, Clara said. My mother, your grandmother, Thomas and Isabel. Thomas and Isabel, he repeated, the names soft with gratitude. They went inside and set 3 candles on the mantel. The brass key rested in its circle of petals. Clara struck a match and tipped the flame to each wick. Light gathered and stayed. Do you think they found each other? He asked. I used to wonder, she said. Now I think they did, and the house learned how to be empty without being lonely. He nodded and brushed her hand. The touch lingered, and she let her fingers turn to meet his. They stood like that for a while, listening to the song and the small sound of wax beginning to pool. I thought love would make everything easier, he said, smiling at himself. And now? Now I think it just makes staying beautiful. Not easy, worth the work. She looked up. Good. I'm stubborn. I'm patient. Between us, maybe we'll build something that lasts. They returned to the porch and watched the lantern walk. A child handed Clara a petal and said it was a mat for spirits. She let it rest in her palm, bright and fragile, and felt a quiet joy older than either of them. Thank you, she told the girl, who nodded and ran on. I kept thinking about last night, about choosing, the way Thomas wrote it. I've chosen many things for Ethan, and I'll keep choosing him. I want to choose this too. You, this porch,
That stubborn clock, and whatever it takes to make room for both kinds of love. Clara stepped closer until his shoulder brushed hers. I can make room, she said. I already have. He kissed her. It wasn't proof or plea, only the continuation of a sentence begun upstairs by the river window. The house seemed to lean into it, sure and easy. When they drew apart, both looked toward the glass. Their reflection shimmered faintly. For a heartbeat, another couple stood there beside them. The man's hand lifted in blessing, the woman's head tilted as if to listen. Clara felt Mason's fingers tighten. Do you see? He began. I do.
They didn't name it. Names are smaller than presents. The image thinned, leaving only candlelight again. Ethan said this house isn't haunted anymore, Mason murmured. He said it was lonely, that's all. Then it just needed company, Clara said, and someone to listen. You did that. We did, she answered, and it felt right to share the credit and the peace. They sat on the top step while lanterns turned slowly on the current, and the song faded to humming. He told her about Ethan's bean plants, how they bent toward the window no matter where he placed them. She told him about her mother's kitchen, how the kettle always rattled once more after the flame went out. It's not a rattle, it's applause. That makes me like it more. He laughed and rested his temple against hers. Night settled soft and watchful. Inside, the clock offered one patient tick that sounded like yes. Will you stay? She asked. When the lanterns go? I'm here, he said. They went in when the last light on the river became a distant coin, and then nothing. He blew out the candles one by one, and the dark came close and warm. The window kept its single flame, the one for travelers. Clara looked at it and felt the quiet certainty that had carried Thomas to his choice, and Isabel to hers. The light stayed, she said. It always does, if someone keeps it. They stood together while the silence settled, and the house, at last, sounded like home. End of chapter 10. End of story. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this story, please subscribe for more free full-length audiobooks, romance, mystery, and everything in between. New stories are released regularly. Settle in, press play, and discover your next favorite listen.